How Jonah's rebellion turned into one of the greatest acts of God's mercy. Have you ever been hit with a moment so intense that you just wanted to bolt, run as far and as fast as you could from what you knew deep down you were supposed to face? Maybe it was a tough conversation, a scary decision, or a call to do something way outside your comfort zone. Well, buckle up, because today we're diving into a wild story from the Bible that's over 2,000 years old but feels like it could have happened yesterday. It's the tale of Jonah, a guy who didn't just ignore God's voice. He literally tried to sail across the world to escape it. And yet, through his rebellion, we're about to witness one of the greatest acts of God's mercy ever recorded. I'm talking storms, a massive fish, a city on the brink of destruction, and a lesson so powerful it might just change how you see your own life. Stick with me, because this isn't just a story, it's a roller coaster of faith, obedience, and divine grace that's going to leave you thinking long after we're done. Picture this. We're in ancient Israel, around 800 BCE, and Jonah's a prophet, a man chosen to carry God's messages to the people. One day, God drops a bombshell on him. Jonah, I need you to go to Nineveh, that massive, wicked city, and tell them their evil has ticked me off. Time's ticking, judgment's coming. Now, Nineveh isn't just any place. It's the capital of Assyria, a powerhouse empire famous for its brutality. Think conquering nations, enslaving people, and leaving a trail of fear wherever they went. To Jonah, an Israelite, these guys were the enemy, the last people he'd want to help. So when God says, "Go warn them," Jonah's like, "Nope, not happening." Instead of heading east to Nineveh, he books it to the coast, jumps on a ship bound for Tarshish, pretty much the opposite direction, and thinks he's outsmarted the Lord. Ever tried to dodge something you knew you couldn't avoid? That's Jonah right now, running from the teachings of the Lord with everything he's got. But here's where it gets crazy. You can't outrun God. Jonah's ship barely gets out to sea when the sky turns black. The wind starts screaming, and waves crash over the deck like they're trying to swallow the whole boat. The sailors, tough guys who've seen storms before, are freaking out, praying to every god they know, tossing cargo overboard to keep from sinking. Meanwhile, Jonah's down below, somehow sleeping through the chaos. The captain storms down and yells, "Are you kidding me? Get up and pray to your God. Maybe he'll save us." The crew casts lots, kind of an ancient way to roll the dice, and boom. It points straight to Jonah. They swarm him. "Who are you? What did you do to bring this on us?" Jonah fesses up, "I'm a Hebrew. I worship the Lord, the God who made the sea and land. And yeah, I'm running from him." The sailors' jaws drop. What do we do now?" Jonah, cool as ever, says, "Throw me overboard. It's the only way." Can you imagine that moment? The guy's so stubborn he'd rather drown than face God's plan. Ever been that desperate to avoid what's right? The sailors don't want to do it. They try rowing harder, fighting the storm, but the sea's relentless. Finally, they pray, "Lord, don't hold this against us," and over Jonah goes. Splash! Instantly, the wind dies, the waves flatten, and the sun peeks out. The sailors are stunned. They start worshiping God right there on the ship. But Jonah, he's not dead. As he sinks into the cold, dark water, something wild happens. God sends a massive fish. Think jaws big enough to gulp a man whole, and it swallows Jonah alive. For 3 days and 3 nights, he's trapped inside this slimy, stinking beast. Picture it. Pitch black. The sound of gurgling guts. Seaweed tangled around him. It's a nightmare, right? But here's the kicker. This isn't punishment, it's mercy. God could have let him drown. But instead, he parks Jonah in a living timeout to think about his choices. Now, let's zoom in on this fish moment. Because it's more than just a cool Bible story. It's dripping with meaning. In ancient times, the sea and its creatures often symbolized chaos, the stuff of nightmares. Jonah's rebellion lands him right in the middle of that chaos. swallowed by it. But God flips the script. That fish isn't his tomb, it's his lifeline. And get this, Jesus himself later ties this to his own story, saying in Matthew chapter 12 verse 40, "For as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of a huge fish, so the Son of Man will be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth." Jonah's 3-day fish trip? It's a sneak peek at the resurrection. A sign of God's power to bring life out of death. Mind-blowing, right? So there's Jonah, stuck in this wet, dark prison, and he finally cracks. He prays, a raw, desperate cry straight from the teachings of the Lord. Listen to this from Jonah chapter 2. "In my distress, I called to the Lord, and he answered me. From deep in the realm of the dead, I called for help, and you listened to my cry. The waters closed over me. The deep surrounded me, but you brought my life up from the pit." Ever hit rock bottom and realized the only way out is up? That's Jonah, pouring out his soul, surrendering to God's mercy. After 3 days, the fish has had enough and, bam, spits Jonah out onto dry land. He's alive, covered in who knows what, but he's got a second chance. God doesn't waste time. "Jonah, go to Nineveh, now." This time, Jonah listens. He treks to this sprawling city. Historians say it was so big it took 3 days to cross, and starts preaching, 40 days. And Nineveh's toast, short, sweet, and terrifying. You'd think a lone foreigner yelling about doom would get laughed off the streets, especially in a place as tough as Nineveh. But something insane happens. The people listen. From the poorest beggar to the king himself. They believe God. They ditch their fancy clothes, throw on sackcloth, fast, and beg for mercy. The king even decrees, "Everyone turn from your evil ways and violence. Maybe God will chill out and spare us." And he does. God sees their repentance, real, heart deep change, and calls off the destruction. A whole city saved because one guy finally said yes to God. What's that tell you about the power of obedience, even when it's reluctant? But here's where Jonah throws us a curveball. Instead of celebrating, he's mad. He stomps off and prays, "God, I knew it. You're too nice, gracious, compassionate, slow to anger, abounding in love. I didn't want to come because I knew you'd forgive them." He's so ticked he asks to die. Seriously, Jonah, you just pulled off the greatest revival in history. And you're pouting? It's almost funny, but it's also real. He hated Nineveh so much he couldn't stand seeing God's mercy rain down on them. Ever felt that way? Wanting someone to get what's coming to them instead of getting a break? God's not done with Jonah yet. While he's sulking outside the city, God grows a plant to shade him. Jonah loves it. Then, overnight, a worm eats it. The sun beats down, and Jonah's back to whining about dying. God steps in. "You're upset about a plant you didn't even grow. Shouldn't I care about Nineveh? 120,000 people who don't know right from wrong. Plus all their animals?" Boom. Mic drop. The story ends with that question hanging in the air, forcing us to wrestle with it. So, what's all this mean for us? Jonah's rebellion turning into God's mercy is packed with wisdom we can grab onto today. First, obedience isn't optional with God. Jonah ran, and it got messy. Storm, fish, the works. We've all got those moments where we know what's right but dodge it anyway. Maybe you're avoiding a tough apology or a risky step of faith. What's your Tarshish? The place you're running to instead of facing God's call. The Bible shows us through Jonah that God's presence is everywhere. There's no escaping his purpose. But here's the hope. Even when we mess up, he's got mercy waiting. That fish wasn't the end for Jonah. It was a reset. Where's your fish moment? The spot where God pulled you back from the edge. Second, God's mercy doesn't play favorites. He saved Jonah, the rebellious prophet, and Nineveh, the wicked city. No one's too far gone for the teachings of the Lord to reach. Think about that. Someone you've written off. Someone you can't stand. God's got his eye on them too. That's wild, right? It challenges us to see people through His lens, not ours. Who in your life needs a dose of that mercy? Maybe it's not just them. Maybe it's you who needs to let go and let God work. Third, our hearts need a checkup. Jonah's anger at Nineveh's salvation shows how easy it is to cling to grudges instead of grace. The Bible calls us to love our enemies, not curse them. Tough? Yeah. Worth it? Absolutely. I met a guy once, let's call him Tom, who'd been burned by a coworker. Years of bitterness later, he felt God nudging him to forgive. He fought it hard. Why give that jerk a pass? But one day, he caved, reached out, and found the guy broken and sorry. They patched things up, and Tom said it was like a weight he didn't know he was carrying just vanished. Sound familiar? What's weighing you down that God's mercy could lift? Here's the wow factor I promised. Imagine we tracked down a scholar who studied Nineveh's ruins. Dr. Emily, an expert on ancient Assyria, told me Nineveh's walls were 100 feet high, its streets buzzing with traders and warriors. It was a fortress of pride and power, yet God brought it to its knees with one man's words. That's the kind of divine power we're dealing with. A God who can flip empires and hearts in a heartbeat. Still think your situation's too big for Him? So, let's wrap this up with a challenge. Jonah's story isn't just about a fish or a city, it's about us. Where are you running from God's call? What's the Nineveh in your life? The place or person you're scared to face? Take a deep breath and ask yourself, what if saying yes to God sparked a mercy moment you never saw coming? Start small, forgive someone. Step up, speak out. The teachings of the Lord promise that obedience opens doors to miracles. Jonah's rebellion became a stage for God's grace. And yours could too. We're all in this journey from darkness to light, doubt to faith. Share this with someone who needs it. Hit subscribe if you're hungry for more Bible truth. And let's keep chasing the Lord's mercy together. Thanks for riding this wave with me. See you in the next one.